Imagine this for a second. It's December 1980. You're a U.S. Air Force sergeant in a dark, kind of spooky forest in England, and you claim you just got a telepathic message from a UFO. And not just any message, but one in pure binary code. Yeah, ones and zeros. So we've got to dive into this, because what was supposedly in that code? Well, that's one of the absolute strangest parts of this entire, very famous story.
And here's the man right at the center of it all, Sergeant Jim Penniston. He was one of the very first military guys on the scene during what turned into a whole series of bizarre sightings. Now, for years, his story was just that, a sighting. But then, way later, he revealed something else. He said that during his encounter, he didn't just see the craft, he claimed he actually touched it.
And right here, this is where the story goes from strange to absolutely wild. Penniston says that the moment he touched the craft, poof, it downloaded 16 pages of ones and zeros directly into his brain. He said he then frantically wrote it all down in his notebook the very next day. So, was this a message from another world? Or maybe even another time?
Okay, so when that code was finally decoded, it revealed something, well, incredible. And what you're seeing here is just a tiny little snippet. It claims to be a message all about humanity. And get this, sent from the year 8100. So, is this it? Is this proof of time travelers? Well, before we can even begin to answer that, we really need to understand what on earth actually happened out there in that forest.
All right, let's set the scene properly. We're in Suffolk, England. We're right outside two major U.S. Air Force bases, RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters. The year is 1980, it's late December, and it's the absolute height of the Cold War. So you can imagine, tensions are sky high. And then, something appears in the woods.
So this whole thing basically went down over two really key nights. First, on December 26th, you've got patrolmen who see these lights coming down into the forest. The next morning, they find these weird marks on the ground. Then, just 2 nights later, it gets even crazier. A super high-ranking officer, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, he leads his own team out there and witnesses even more bizarre stuff, which, and this is awesome, he documents on a now famous audio tape as it's happening.
And look, this isn't just some story someone told over a beer. This description you're seeing, it's from an official memo, written by Colonel Halt himself and sent straight to the British Ministry of Defense. He's describing a real, tangible, physical object. So the key takeaway here is, we have credible, high-ranking military witnesses describing a craft of unknown origin. But you know what? The most compelling piece of evidence is still that binary code.
Okay, so how in the world do you get from pages and pages of ones and zeros to a message from the future? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple, and the process itself, it kind of tells a story all on its own. We just need to get our heads around 2 really basic concepts from, you guessed it, 20th century computing. First up, let's talk binary. So instead of our usual 10 digits, 0 through 9, binary just uses 2, a 0 and a 1. That's it. It's the language of computers, right? So a number like 111 in binary isn't 111. Nope, it's actually 14 plus 12 plus 11, which all adds up to 7. See? Simple enough, right?
But wait, how do you turn numbers into actual words? Well, that's where this thing called ASCII comes in. Think of it like a universal code book from the 1970s. It just gives every single letter and every symbol a specific number. For instance, the capital letter A is always number 65. So if you can turn a binary string into a regular number, you can just look up that number on an ASCII table and boom, you get a letter.
Okay, so let's put it all together. The whole decoding thing is just 3 super simple steps. Step 1, you take a chunk of binary from the notebook. Step 2, you convert that into a normal, everyday number. And step 3, you look up that number on an ASCII table to find the letter it matches. You just do that over and over and over again, and eventually, you've got a message.
And this little table just shows you perfectly how it works. Check it out. The very first string of binary in Penniston's notebook, it converts to the number 69, and in ASCII, 69 is the letter E. The next one, that's 88, which is an X. Then 80, which is a P. You can already see it, can't you? The word exploration is starting to take shape. It seems like it works perfectly. But you gotta look a little closer.
So the full first line actually decodes to exploration o humanity. Wait, OG? Not of humanity, but OG. This happened because just one single digit, a 1, got flipped to a 0. It's a tiny, tiny error.
But that one tiny error, oh, that is a huge clue. It tells us that whatever encoding method was used here has zero error correction, which, let's be honest, is super bizarre for a supposedly advanced intelligence trying to send a reliable, important message, right?
And that's the moment you start to realize maybe the code itself is way more revealing than the actual message. The way it was written, the structure of it. It's just packed with clues that point not to the year 8100, but, you guessed it, directly to the year 1980.
Okay, first off, just like we saw, this simple binary system is incredibly fragile. I mean, come on. Any advanced intelligence, whether we're talking aliens or future humans, would almost certainly use a much more robust code, something that makes sure their vital message actually gets through, without being messed up by simple mistakes like turning OF into OG. And second, why ASCII? I mean, of all the ways to communicate, why pick a standard that is a distinctly 20th century American invention? And why just English? That's such a specific, culturally bound choice. It is definitely not a universal language. It is, however, the language of the people who claimed to have received the message.
Okay, now this is a fantastic little detail. Technically, ASCII characters only need 7 binary digits to work, but the message uses 8-digit groups, what we call bytes. And that 8th digit? It's always a 0, which means 13% of the entire message is just wasted space. Completely inefficient for a transmitted message, but it's exactly how someone familiar with basic computer programming in the 1980s would think about and write out binary.
And finally, let's talk about the coordinates that were supposedly in the message. They use latitude and longitude. I mean, that system is entirely Earth-based. It only works if you know exactly where Greenwich, England is. For any off-world visitor, or heck, a future civilization, this would be a totally arbitrary and pretty useless way to describe a location. It's a message that was clearly encoded by someone with a very human, very 1980s, very earthbound perspective.
So, okay, if the code is looking this suspect, what about the physical encounter itself? You know, the lights, the craft, the marks on the ground? Well, as it turns out, there is some pretty down-to-earth explanations for all of that, too.
You know, when you just lay the two stories side by side, it really becomes a choice between the extraordinary and the pretty mundane. For every single mysterious element of the UFO story, there's a corresponding skeptical explanation that honestly fits the facts on the ground.
And check this out. This map might just show us the most likely culprit for those flashing lights. It was actually created by the Forestry Service, and it shows a direct line of sight from where the airmen were standing, right through the trees, to the Orford Ness lighthouse. You can just imagine its powerful beam sweeping through the forest at night. It could easily be mistaken for something way more mysterious.
And yeah, the expert consensus really backs this up. The police report from that night, it only mentions the lighthouse. Astronomers, they confirmed a massive fireball meteor was seen burning up at the exact time of the first sighting, which could totally explain the descending lights. The radiation readings they took, they were normal background levels. And those landing marks, a local forestry worker identified them as just common rabbit scrapes.
So, with all this evidence pointing the other way, why does this story hang on? Why is Rendlesham still called Britain's Roswell? Well, I think it's because the legend is it's often more compelling than the reality, isn't it? It's a heck of a story, built on the testimony of credible military guys in a really high-stakes location during the Cold War.
And it's also a story that has, well, it's grown over time. It's so important to remember that the most spectacular details, we're talking about touching the craft and receiving a binary code. None of that was in the original witness statements from 1980. Those details were added decades later, as the story morphed from just a strange sighting into a full-blown legend.
And that brings us right back to where we started, with the code. In the end, what you believe about the Rendlesham Forest incident might just come down to this one question. What's the real mystery here? Is it the cryptic message about humanity's origin sent all the way from the year 8100? Or is it the very human, very 1980s, error-filled method that was used to write it? It kind of feels like the real evidence was encoded in the code itself.